Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Welcome to Welfare Clinic. We'll be discussing today about knife crime and young people and how knife crime is affecting our community. I have three amazing guests with me this evening with significant knowledge in those particular field in their own rights. And I will start to introduce my guest and we will crack on with the questions, and you can join us live on London Bangla page, on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page. You can ask questions, you can call us, you can message us, and we will put your question to our guest, or you can comment. My first guest is Councillor Mumtaz Khan. She's a Labour councillor in Newham, London Borough of Newham. She's a social worker in child protection, and she also worked for many years in youth offending area. And Mumtaz will correct me if I'm wrong on that. But Mumtaz, welcome to the show. Mumtaz, can you hear us? Okay, there seem to be some technical issues. I will come back to Mumtaz. My second guest is Nurun Ahmed. She's mother of three, businesswoman, marketing professional. I'm sure she needs no introduction. She is our own celebrity in Bangladeshi community and in the UK, I'm sure around the world as well. She was the first hijabi to be on BBC Apprentice. Nurun, welcome to the show.
Hello and assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me.
No problem. My last but not least guest, somebody probably need no introduction. Everybody probably knows him, Councillor Nasim Ali OBE. He's a Labour councillor since 2002 in London Borough of Camden. He was elected as mayor of Camden in 2003, and he was the first British, Bangladeshi, and Muslim mayor of Camden. He was one of the youngest mayor in the country. I'm sure he probably taken my title now, because I thought I was one of the youngest councillor and deputy mayor in the country. But Nasim Bhai also is professionally, he's the chief executive of King Cross Neighbourhood Association, where there is three community centres that he manages. Nasim Bhai, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Ali. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Can I quickly go back to Councillor Mumtaz Khan? Mumtaz, can you hear us?
You may have lost connection, I think.
Okay, we will come back. I think there is issues with the internet. Unfortunately, it does happen at times. So let me start off, Nasim Bhai, with you. You've been a councillor for many years. You are a politician. Mumtaz, can you hear us?
We can. Yeah, I can.
Okay, fantastic. I did your introduction and I welcomed you, but I couldn't hear your response. So
yeah, my apology, Oli. It's technology. I've been
no problem. We fully understand, and I'm sure my audience will understand that it does happen with even the modern technology. Things can go wrong. So I was starting asking Nasim Bhai the question. You've been a councillor for many years. Where do you think we are failing when it comes to knife crime?
I think there's several issues. It's just not us. If we're talking about society, where are we failing? I mean, I used to be a youth worker, and one of the biggest issues with knife crime is, first of all, you've got to have a good relationship with the young people as parents in the school, teach about the impact of knife, the damage of what knife can do to a person. But also, I think, society in itself has to take ownership, have better communities, more facilities. Youth services have been shut down by the government, the funding cuts over the decade. We're seeing, the impact of that. So young people have got nowhere to go. We've also seen police numbers have been reduced, so that has an impact. Less police on the streets, so more young people. And also young people think they can make money out of it, because knife crime, a lot of it, I was looking at the statistics, and a lot of it is to do with gang violence, gangs, and ultimately drugs, that they try to make money out of it. And that's where a majority of the knife crime is related to. So I think it's a holistic societal issue. We all need to work together to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nasim Bhai, and I come back to you. Mumtaz, in terms of where Councillor Nasim Bhai have touched on the government funding and the gangs and all of this, but you worked as a social worker in child protection. You worked for 12 years for youth offending. Now you are an elected councillor, so you probably seen all of those avenues where how it's affecting people. But is it right just to say then it's the funding, or is this the main core issue that where it's affecting our young people in general?
Okay, thank you, Oliur. I think what we need to put some of this in context. So I worked in the youth offending team for many years, and some of the issues that in the 90s, what we saw was, particularly in East London, what we saw, it was a rise in Bangladeshi and Asian boys getting involved in drug trafficking and getting involved in the criminal justice system. What's very shocking is then what leads to knife crime. And I think several government reports have evidence that there is a strong link between drug dealing, drug trafficking, and knife crime, which, what we know from our experience in working in the field is that there are vulnerable young people who are being targeted. And some of these vulnerable children are as young as 13 who are involved in drug trafficking. And we hear things like county line drug dealing, where the bigger boys often target vulnerable children to sell drugs on the street. Now, it's easy to blame each government that comes into power. It's a fact that austerity plays a big role in where we are in terms of public services and what support is being provided for vulnerable families and young people. We've seen a huge, and Nasim Bhai has already kind of touched on that, we've seen a huge cut on youth services. Now, we as individuals, we as a community, we also need to take responsibilities. We can't just blame authorities for not pumping in enough money. We know that. It's a fact that, if you look at how many hundreds of police officers have been, the posters being cut, what that does is it creates groups of drug dealers to target, again, vulnerable families.
But can I just touch on that? Sorry to interrupt you. And before I bring in Nurun into the picture, you said that obviously the community do a little bit more, but what is it that community really do? Because at the moment, if you see the Metropolitan Police figures showed from 2019 that half of all knife crime offenders were in London, and teenagers or even younger children, including 8% being aged just 10 to 14. So you can see they are very, very young children. And what is it that community need to do or in specific way?
If I could just sort of add to this, obviously what Mumtaz was actually saying in terms of youth services, I personally think in terms of, I know there is a knife program in place and that's nationwide. and unfortunately, the highest knife crime is in London. I think last year, going by the ONS statistics, it was 169 fatal stabbings. And I think the target group that you're talking about in terms of education has to start from schooling. So if it's from a very young age where you've got lots of sort of other education taking place, I think knife crime has to be a priority in one of the modules that they actually start sort of introducing. I know there's a lot of sort of the knife sort of crime plan that has been implemented, but I think it's such a serious issue. And unfortunately, kids young as 6, 7, they've all got access to mobile phones. And what's happened with social media, they've hyped up gang crime. So they've sensationalized and made it very appealing. So you've got gang culture, which is very appealing to young boys. So, you know, if you look at music industry, if you look at the movies, even if you look at even the clothing, the fashion clothing nowadays, it's all gang culture, and it's very, very appealing. And young boys, especially, they aspire to be sort of the roadmen, as you know, that's the new terminology, unfortunately. And that's what's kicking in. It's social media, you know, it's the whole music industry. I'm not saying, you know, it's, you know, per se they're to blame, but education is key, and obviously education at home. And I think whatever they learn at school, that has to be reinforced by the community and the neighborhoods. So I think, you know, there's so many macro factors that are at play.
Mumtaz, I just want to give you the opportunity just to finish what you were saying. So obviously, in terms of young people, because you mentioned about the community as well, and I just wanted to hear from you as a councillor and as a social worker, what is that community need to do or not doing enough?
Okay. So I think as a community, we know the problem is there. We can't deny that anymore. Okay, what we have to start addressing is, if the problem is in my household, we've got to start recognizing that we need to admit that the problem is happening. We need to accept help, and we have to start recognizing the signs. Okay, when young people are constantly on their iPad, we as parents need to have a much more responsible role in checking what they're actually doing. When a young person is shutting away and not sharing, you know, is very secretive, or showing signs of distress, or you know, extra money that, you know, you've noticed they have access to, they have, you know, goods like mobile phone, you know, luxury goods, you need to start questioning where that's coming from. Surely young people cannot be gifted you know, such high price goods by another young person. Okay, these are real indicators. We as parents, we need to start looking at that. Where is the cause of these issues? Okay,
Yeah.
who is my child hanging around with? And what we have to also try and establish is routine, build close relationship with your children, and be able to talk about their worries and their anxieties. That, as parents, when we're able to do that, and when we're able to educate our community that that's the way forward for us, okay, I think the bottom line is we have to start taking responsibilities.
Nasim bhai, you are, well as being a politician, you know, community activist, you work within the community, but you're also a father. And what I wanted to ask, from what Mumtaz said, pointing from her point of view, in terms of that we need to do a little bit more, we need to ask more questions of our children if they got things. But do you think maybe the fathers, do you think in general, but also specifically in the Bangladeshi community, because that's the community that you and I know very well, do you think that our fathers are focusing more elsewhere rather than focusing on their children, or are we doing, as the fathers, are we doing enough?
I think, Oli, you know, obviously it's not just fathers but mothers as well. So I mean, I've got two teenage boys, and I know what they're up to in terms of gang crime and stuff. So if they're I know what they're up to because they're never going out. If they go out, I know where they're going. I know who they're seeing. I know in terms of, I suppose the other issue is in terms of social media, it's hard to keep a tap on what they're doing on their phones. But I know they're not going out. They're not using knives or guns. So it's a responsibility for parents to know what their sons and daughters as well. Because knife crime isn't just boys, there's girls that are doing it as well. What they're up to. And again, I think it's a point that sort of Mumtaz touched on. I think, you know, we need to take responsibility as parents. We can't keep thinking about respect, because sometimes, you know, whilst we're growing up, there's a respect thing within our community of like, you know, don't talk to your dad about this. Don't talk to your, mainly with boys and dads, that you can't have a proper conversation. I think you need to be open with your kids now. Know what they're doing, know what they're getting up to, know what their friends are, who their friends are, what their friends are getting up to. Also, some kids are coming in driving fast cars. You know, they got Mercedes, they've got BMWs, they've got Ferraris, and the parents aren't asking where's the money coming from. They're just taking the money. So hold on, where's that money coming from? That money's got to be coming from somewhere. So people need to, if you're getting goods and luxury goods, you need to question, where is that money coming from? How are you getting that money? If it's got a nice job, I mean, I used to walk down Camden High Street, but through, and that's a big drug dealing area, especially for the Somali community. And this is like a year ago, and I was married in 2003. Young people coming up to me saying, don't go to him, he's the mayor, because don't try to deal drugs with him. So I'm saying to them, look, I can get you a job. Come and get off the street. I can get you a job. They're like, Nash, you can't get me, you know, £50,000. I'm like, no, I can't get you a job for £50,000 straight away. But start, work hard, and you can get 50,000. That's the sort of money they're on. So, you know, it's hard. We'll have to work on this together. And we've got, because we had a knife crime, we looked into it in terms of feedback of what the issues were around knife crime in Camden. And we found that Somali parents were saying to us that they've lost communication with their teenagers. They don't know how to communicate with them. So we started educating the parents as well, providing support for the parents as well. And I think that's something that needs to happen within the Bangladeshi community, where it's hamlets. I mean, in Camden, we're doing it now. So I think, you know, other boroughs where there's, if it's a Bangladeshi, whatever issue, as Nurun was saying, it goes back to education as well. So the government needs to look at all aspects, education for the young people, but also parents as well, because there's parenting issues here. And then society has a part to play as well, because if everyone blames everyone else's child, it's not going to work, because we all need to work on this together. Us as council.
Would you agree with me? And you don't have to, but do you think that often that we see not just the Bangladeshi community, but South Asian community in general, that they seem to be more focused into whether it's a back home politics or association politics or being involved in, do you think that, because obviously you mentioned mothers, and that we have two ladies, both of them are mothers, and I will let them respond to that. But obviously, do you think that, because what I'm seeing where I stand, I see that they might be a little bit more, their attention might be elsewhere a little bit more than where it should be. Am I wrong in thinking in that?
Not all of them. I think we might be generalizing if we think that. You know, look, there's a minority of especially Bangladeshi men who, in order to get some fame, they're in touch with, you know, politics from Bangladesh and doing it here. And that's like, you know, I don't think that, you know, that's what entertains them. But for us, we're in this country and we need to be engaged in the politics here, or engaged in society here, whether it's politics or not. And we need to know what's going on, what's happening within our locality. I don't think that's the main issue. I suppose, you know, again, like we can be developing policy here, and it's mothers as well as fathers. So I'm sure Nurun and Mumtaz will have, you know, I'm sure as mothers, they know what their kids get up to. They've got good communication with their kids. Communication is vital. And I think that's where we lack it sometimes, you know. And again, like kids go out and parents don't know where they're gone all day and night. And sometimes they're happy. And sometimes it's also, you know, housing is a big issue with COVID-19. We've seen housing is a big issue to the inequality. If you've got living in council flat and you've got 7 kids, you're happy the kids are going out. But the sad thing is they don't know where the kids are going out to, and the kids are going out with maybe, you know, part of knife crime, but when they're coming back in, they're not talking to them. So communication has to be a big issue, and obviously housing, again, you know, impacts on everything, including gangs and knife crime.
Councillor,
I wanted to, sorry,
yeah,
I just wanted to add, obviously when it comes to parents, you know, you've got absent fathers, but you've also got absent mothers. And what I mean by absent mothers, unfortunately, everything is linked. So we've got a very high rate of domestic issues. And if the mother is not mentally stable, so emotionally drained out with certain, you know, whether it's financial issues, whether it's domestic abuse, whichever it is, everything has an impact on children. And again, with the fathers as well. So, you know, you've got gambling issues, you've got so many issues sort of spread across. And when the communication sort of barriers do break down, unfortunately, it starts from the adults, and then it sort of, you know, trickles down. And that's when total communication is, you know, it's the whole chain is actually broken. And that's when you get the young boys or young girls, unfortunately, going into the wrong crowd, or going into sort of, you know, adopting wrong habits, unfortunately, because for them is an escape, get away from whatever you know is happening at home. And I think when I used to live and work in Tower Hamlets, I know there was a lot of parenting courses available for you know, Bangladeshi parents, and that was actually it was delivered in Bengali as well as English. And unfortunately, the uptake was very low, and I think that was very, very crucial for parents to know how to deal and tackle, you know, their children, you know, what to look out for online. And unfortunately, you know, we used to sort of drum out the leaflets, and it was very sad to see, you know, the uptake. So that when you do get parents saying, oh, we don't know anything about social media, we don't know anything about mobile phones, we don't know, and we're like, hang on a minute, you know, we've got, you know, Tower Hamlets have interjected, you know, they've pumped in so much money to these parenting courses, and I'm sure Mumtaz Appa would, you know, agree to this. And when she's, you know, these are the parenting courses that are offered by Tower Hamlets, and the uptake is very low. So I think at the end of the day, like I said, family, you know, in terms of family communication breaks down if the parents are not healthy, they don't have a healthy relationship, that impacts the children.
Mumtaz?
So one of the things that we tend to undermine the power of gangs. So the groups of gang members tend to dominate things that are missing in young people's lives. So they come in and fill that gap where a young person feels that you know, the family, their own family, are probably not meeting their full needs. Okay, sometimes young people who have joined gangs feel so loyal to their gang members that they are prepared to hurt their own family members. It's almost like the gang members are their parents, and sometimes when things go wrong, you know, they themselves get hurt, and they are sent out to do the jobs for the bigger, the older, and the more powerful gang members. So I think what we don't often understand is the culture of gang members and gang groups. And within individual boroughs, there's like over 10 groups of gangs, and they have their individual names. And these young people are recruited. And society as a whole, we need to acknowledge that in every corner that there could be a possible monster that's targeting my child.
Do you think what Nurun said in terms of the language barrier, and Nasimba and Nurun, you can come in on that as well, but in terms of the language barriers, do you think when the local authorities or other voluntary sectors organize group sessions or information session, do you think it's the language barriers that prevents our parents going to it, or do you think they're just not interested? Because
I think I mean, my understanding of Nurun was saying wasn't about the language barrier, but it was
the
about
communication barriers, yeah.
parents' communications between the parents as well. So it's not the language barrier, but it's that sometimes the parents don't communicate together with them. So children don't get a good positive atmosphere at home. And it sort of adds into what Mumtaz was saying, is that if you're not happy and you go out, you know, it's like radicalization, or it's like child sexual exploitation. If you're not happy, you go outside and this gangster comes and puts an arm around you and says, hey, I know what you're up to, you know, come with me, I'll give you this. Here's a nice mobile phone. Go and buy nice trainers. You know, here's a nice key to a nice car you can have. Then suddenly they start building that relationship with those gangsters. And then the parents have aren't aware. So the kids start becoming a family with the gangs. And that's how it starts. And then they start indoctrinating them, taking them away from the good life, which should be with the family. But if the parents have got their own issues, then obviously, you know, that's hard for them to understand. But I don't totally agree with that as the majority of the cases, because obviously I don't, you know, domestic violence happens in every society. And to be fair, Oli, I think, you know, we're talking about knife crime here. And I don't think, you know, it's not massive in terms of numbers. I was watching, like, you know, over 1,000 cases in London in the past year. And the majority, you know, the highest was Westminster. So it's not big issue within the Bangladeshi community. Obviously, it's a big issue. In Camden, it's not as bad for the Bangladeshi community as it is for the Somali community. But I think at the same time, we need to be aware of it. And we need to be aware of the gangs that are trying to manipulate our kids and indoctrinate them and try to, like, recruit our children. And in Camden, we're providing support for the families, wherever they're Bangladeshi, wherever they're Somali, where, you know, whatever background they are. And I'm sure in Redbridge, in, you know, other boroughs, Newham, Tower Hamlets, they're doing that work. But I think that ultimately it's a broader picture that everyone needs to work together on this and stop those gangs from getting them in the first place. And I think,
gang
you know,
members that are targeting the vulnerable ones.
For me, it goes back to the youth centres again. You know, I think that's where young people, as a youth worker before, young people go there and you're like a parent to them in the youth centre, and they can confidentially talk to you if they can't talk to parents. So it's a safe haven where they can go voluntarily, and you can educate them as a teacher in a sense of, like, you know, it's not compulsory, it was a voluntary affiliation. And that's where you can be friendly with the young person and support them and tell them the impact of joining gangs and getting into knife crime.
Simba, I think you mentioned something really important, which is about Westminster. Now, people immediately think knife crime is only happening in places like Tower Hamlet, Newham, and Waltham Forest. That's not correct. A borough like Westminster is one of the highest. You know, it's in official government documents, and then you've got Haringey, Islington, Hackney, Camden, Brent, which features you know, having the highest level of knife crime. So what does that tell us? That you know, it doesn't necessarily say that it's happening in the Black community. It's happening in the Asian community. It's actually happening in every community.
I mean, Mumtaz, I think just to be clear, I'm just looking at the stats on the computer. Top is Westminster because of the nighttime economy, the drugs market. The others are Lambeth, Southwark, Croydon, Newham, Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Lewisham, Brent, Enfield, Greenwich. a majority of it, I think, it's areas that are predominantly Black or Asian. So it is knife crime is a big issue within the Black or Asian community, more so than white, but also it's with gangs and it's with drugs. It's within those cultures. So the top 10, out of the top 10, top 9, apart from Westminster and Enfield, or even Enfield, the others are majority Black. They have large BAME communities. So I don't think we can take that away from those top 10.
I think regardless of which community has the sort of the highest knife crime, I think the strategy or the approach remains the same. And it is the older gang members that are preying on the vulnerable. So I think it's sort of using preventative measures to get in, sort of early. So it all boils down to where money is being sort of pumped into neighborhood community groups where they can tackle all of these issues. And I think we can only sort of tackle our own community, being from the Bangladesh community. So obviously we're not going to go and tackle anybody else. So we have to look at the roots, at the root sort of problem and closer to home. So we need to do our bit, which is closer to home. So obviously, whether it's Tower Hamlets or whether it's Hackney, whichever it is, we can only sort of play our part in the Bangladeshi community, and obviously as a whole, as a South Asian community, because that's obviously what we're closest to. If we've got our sort of resources, we've got fantastic you've got influencers on social media. You can even use Bangladeshi or South Asian influencers to deliver messages to our youth. To use sort of community champions, so to speak, to visit schools. There isn't really many youth centres, but wherever sort of the gang culture sort of exists. And I think it is working closely with our own community to actually help and improve lower the levels of crime.
So if I can ask the two councillors, because Nurun touched on about youth centres, and I know the many local authorities around London have significantly reduced their youth service and cuts in funding. And I think what Councillor Nasim said earlier on in terms of where people are living in a very extremely overcrowded homes, and children need to go out. We don't have many green spaces in London. So where do they go? How do they socialize? So obviously we blame the government about the funding cuts, and obviously education and all of them, they do have a significant role to play in. But local authority can also decide how they spend their own money and where they make saving and cuts. So why do they target these people's service?
Yeah, can I come in there? I mean, look, as a Camden councillor, and I'm sure Mumtaz is going to come in from a new point of view.
Your borough is quite relatively good when it comes to knife crime, isn't it?
So we've had 50% of our budget cut from by the government since 2010. So when you say local authorities have their budget, 50%, government cuts, that is a lot of money. So we've still kept 17 youth centres open. We've had 3 murders, mainly Somali young people, and it's black on black, and it was gang related, drugs related in Camden. But at the same time, we've got our own strategy, and we looking at youth safety. We set up a youth safety task force that was chaired by Keir Starmer and Abdul Hai, one of the cabinet members. So we looked at the key issues, and we're putting money into it in terms of the recommendations that came out. But yeah, it is about young people getting into drugs, and what the parents were saying was that they don't know how to communicate with their young people. These are Somali parents. They're mainly lone parents because they came here as refugees after the war, and their dads got killed in the war, and it's single parent families. And they don't know how to look after their young people. So that's part of the issue. So we're trying to educate the parents as well in terms of putting support into not just youth centres, but community centres as well. So it's a holistic approach. you know, I think Nurun was saying earlier in terms of the Bangladeshi community, but I think when it comes to this, I mean, obviously, Mumtaz and I are council, we think about everyone. I think it's a wider issue than just the Bangladeshi issue. We have to work with everyone because the gangs are so mixed now. The gangs don't work in racist, you know, around racial lines. Before it was race, you know, around race lines. Now it's territorialism, and there's so many gangs that they work around territories. So in order to separate the gang, you got to work on their territories, work on the gang members, and work on supporting their families and the young people. So it's youth centres, community centres, and it is very hard with the government cuts. So you know, yeah, we have our money, but it's still hard even for a borough like Camden.
No, basically what I was saying, so it's sort of like, you know, segmenting each community and reaching each community using your own resources. So obviously, you know, you'd use Bangladeshi sort of members to, you know, tackle Bangladesh community, not just to isolate one community and just focus on one. But like I said, you know, regardless of race or yeah, so the strategy remains the same basically. Yeah, that's all.
Mumtaz, do you want to come in here?
Yeah. So as a borough, I think June 2019 we took a deliberate decision to invest more in youth hubs because Roxana Fayez, the new mayor, came into power in 2018 and decided that that was an area that we really needed to concentrate on, again, because of the incidence of knife crime and how we engage our young people. And I think what we kind of missed out on in this program is we are not listening to young people. What we often do is we go away, we're planning services, the councils making decisions about young people, and they're not part of that process. One of the things that we Newham did was we started talking to young people. We wanted our young people to tell us what would be more beneficial to them. And a majority of the young people were saying that, does it matter? Views and opinion matter. Of course it matters, because at the end of the day, you know, young people need to be part of planning their future. And only then, why should young people trust the police? Why should young people trust social workers? You know, decisions, I think we are going to struggle.
I think we're having a problem again with the signal. Nurun, I know you'll have to go shortly. I just want to get your thoughts before you go. It's a very controversial subject, is stop and search. And during lockdown, there was 22,000 black men was stopped. Of that, 80% of the stop and search between March and May led to no further action. So do you think when the police stop people or profile people, that does have a significant impact? And does that have a negative impact on young people? I just wanted to get your thoughts just before you leave on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the media has a very, very big role to play in this. Unfortunately, we've seen what happened in America with the George Floyd incident. You know, people lack confidence in the police and the whole system. And unfortunately, it's very sort of, you know, if you go look in the US with all the riots and everything in terms of discrimination. And I think the same applies to here in the UK. And I think, you know, especially black men, young black men are actually used as scapegoats or stereotyped. And like I said, a lot of people have actually lost the confidence within the policing system. And I think sometimes, you know, the wrong people are actually targeted. And I think it all boils down to confidence. And again, you know, back to sort of raising awareness. And I think, you know, the youth, especially, you know, in the UK or, you know, in London, they are quite resentful towards, you know, the police force. because it's just like Muslim men being targeted, people with long beards or with the rucksacks, the same the same sort of profiling. And unfortunately, I think it's very stereotypical, and people have actually lost the confidence, which is a big issue. And I think if people don't have confidence in their own law and in their own policing system and in law and order, then I think the society as a whole, it will break down.
Thank you, Nurun. I know you're going to have to leave us shortly, and no doubt, I'm sure we'll bring you on some other time. But thank you so much for your contribution and joining us this evening.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and Assalamu alaikum as well. Take my leave. Bye.
So I go now. I'm left with the two councillors, Councillor Mumtaz Khan and Councillor Nasim Ali, one from Newham and one from Camden. And so what is your view? Because I asked a similar question to Nurun in terms of the stop and search, because I've looked at some of the figures. In May, there was 43,000 stopped compared to 21,000 a year earlier. So you can see it's almost more than double figures where people have been stopped, and of that 30% was all black male in London. So it's a quite high percentage of black men getting stopped. And I have witnessed many times, and I'm sure you have on the street, when a black man is stopped, there's 4, 5, 6 police cars, there's 10, 15 police officers that tackling just one or two individuals.
Oli, I mean, I was part of the independent advisory group after the Stephen Lawrence murder. So after the Macpherson report, I actually advised the Metropolitan Police on stop and search. And I think, when it was highlighted the Met was institutionally racist, things improved. But I think what we're seeing now is that things are getting worse again. But I think one of the other issues, and again, it's a touchy subject, is that, most of the knife crime, if you look at, especially in Camden, majority of it was black on black. So if the police officers are to stop the knife crime, then the problem was in Camden, they had to search more black young people because majority of was black gangs. That's a difficulty in Camden. Now, I'm not saying that, across London, majority of the people that commit crime are black, but the difficulty sometimes that happens. If they do it properly, then I've got no objections. But I think the numbers are very high, and there's still institutional racism within the police force, and that needs to be looked at. And I think, at the same time, we need to look at the issues of how do we work with the police as a community to get to the bottom of this and build better relationships between the police and the community.
Mumtaz, you work obviously as a social worker, and you see lot of issues among the families, well as being a councillor. And so obviously I want you to comment on stop and search, but also I want you to specifically touch on something what Nurun mentioned earlier, where people may have gambling problem, drinking problems. And when you have family members with that sort of problems or issues, what kind of support they can get, or how can they overcome? Because many people can get into those sort of traps for many reasons, and sometimes without fault of their own. But how do they overcome from that? What kind of support can they get?
Okay, so Oliur, you've been a councillor for a long time. You know, in terms of the stop and search issue, we've been campaigning for a long time. We know it's a fact. Okay, we've got enough figures to show, and Nasim Bhai has already mentioned that more black kids are likely to be stopped by the police. Okay, and the only way we can overcome that is by having more black people in decision-making positions. Okay, we need more judges who are black from ethnic minority communities. we need to have a police force that really reflects our community, and we're failing. We're failing that. You know, if you look at, you know, I haven't got the exact figures. You know, if you look at in every department of the council, in every local authority, what you will end up seeing is the top positions are normally held by your white supremacy. Okay, you know, you in education. Okay, it's pure racism. Okay, in the years of my work in the youth offending system, you know, it's so clear how the judicial system treats our young Black people. Okay, they are more likely to face a prison sentence than your white counterpart kids. Okay.
We got a comment. Sorry, Mumtaz. Let me just stop you, and you can comment on that, and then Nasim Bhai can come in. Somebody commented, "Let's talk it straight and not go around the bush." Knife crime is due to, I'm not going to use that word they use, prison sentences and police not having enough power to stop anyone on the street. Let's start locking them up in solitary confinement and whoever caught with the knife. Now, I don't agree with that sentiment, but it seems one of our viewer is quite firmly believe that there is not enough power the police have to stop people.
I can understand. Yeah, I can understand there are some very angry residents who may have lost a loved one, may have been a victim of a knife crime. So we have to balance things, and you know, with all the incidents locally, I can see that there are some very angry residents who want answers. Now, that's not the solution. We can't lock up young people. We can't lock up, you know, locking up and sending people to prison is not the solution, because we've seen it. The prison is full of prisoners. When they come out, are they reformed? No. We have to have a better education system to be able to educate our young people. We have to educate our community, whether we're talking about the Black community, the Asian community, or the white community. Okay, we have to promote better education.
But I think, Mumtaz,
I'm not beating around the bush.
I think you know, there is scope to have tougher sentencing. So I think sometimes the sentencing doesn't actually go with the crime. So I think, you know, some of the sentences could be tougher, and there could be better reform system. But you're right, I don't agree with locking up and throwing away the key, because that doesn't work. But I have also got my family members sending messages saying, you know, there needs to be more discipline. You know, like within the Bangladeshi households where we grew up, it was a respect, where if you respect your family members, because of respect, you stayed on the right and narrow, you know, like when they, obviously before it was like use the cane or the single, and, you know, and we don't believe in that, but there's got to be that respect level of within the community. And again, it comes back to that education of parenting and having that communication with the
Nasim Bhai,
kids.
you touched on something earlier that I very strongly agree with, is about having an open dialogue with your children, understanding your children, sitting down, you know, the dinner table or going for a drive with your children and having that kind of conversation. And I don't know, you know, the element of respect, that barrier, I feel that it still exists, because a lot of the sometime, you know, children will go and share things with their mom, but they won't share with their dad. Some children will share with their dad and not with their mom, and the mom wouldn't know anything about it, or the vice versa. and sometimes that can be an issue, because sometimes the daddy, or if it's a daddy's girl or mommy's boy or mommy's girl, they will say, oh, okay, so you can see that sometimes, although I don't blame any parents, because I sincerely believe they do it with the best intention, but sometimes they can be unintentionally having a negative impact on their children.
And that comes back to parenting skills, doesn't it? I think one of the best programs that the Labour government brought out was Sure Start, that taught parents how to parent their kids. So in terms of good investment of money, because I think a lot of parents don't know how to parent their children. So again, it's good communication. You need to have clear, open communication with your children. It doesn't matter whether it's with the mother or father, as long as they talk to one of the parents, and then the parents talk to each other, because then the family knows what that child is up to. And if you earn the respect, because look, respect has to be earned. If you earn the respect of your kids, you can be open. You don't have to talk about, things that you don't want to bring out. You can still have your respect and have an open relationship. Because again, I think it's good to have that common openness with children, rather than hide away and then find out that they become drug dealers, or they've gone into, other nasty business or into gang crime, and then it's too late. Just because you had no communication, because you wanted your son just to say salam to you and nothing else, not to talk to you at all. I can't hear any of you.
Can you hear me now, Mumtaz?
I can hear you, but I can see Mumtaz, but I think she's frozen.
Yeah, I think she has frozen. But let me just ask you, Nasimba, in terms of, obviously, you talked about the parenting and having a open dialogue with children and stuff like that. But I still think that, say, like, for example, remember when we had teenage pregnancy was at rise some years back, and lot of teenagers was getting pregnant, and it was quite high in Tower Hamlets many years back. And the question I always used to say, do the parents know about it? What kind of conversation did the parents have? And it seems like that, yes, some parents are very good at it, having that kind of conversation and talking to their children, and know exactly, like you said, you have two teenage boys, exactly where they are when they going out. And I remember when I was a councillor, I used to go around the school when talking to the parents, and I used to say, look, if your child is out at 10 o'clock at night, that is not responsibility of the local authority or the councillors to know where your child is. It is your responsibility to know where your child is. And I think I still feel, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to be wrong in that, but I still feel there is an element of that the parents is still not doing. Some parents, not all, I must make that very clear, but some parents still might not be doing enough.
I mean, I think you're right, because Mumtaz is back, and we do a lot of work with families, and hopefully she can hear us now. And that's what we're finding, that majority of people still don't have that communication. Go on, Mumtaz, we missed you. Go on.
Okay, all right. So, Ollie, you're right. I think there is still a lot for us to do. And I think, I wanted to touch on the previous question that you asked about the support system that we have for our parents. See, there's this notion that if a parent is able to bring a child to the world, we automatically think that they can parent. No. Parenting depends on the type of parenting you as a child had, behaviors that you've learned, you've evidenced, witnessed, models that you've grown up seeing. And there are some features of the nature. Naturally, there are some techniques parents pick up, but a lot of it is to do with the environment that you've grown up in. I think, although there are lots of community projects that have been shut down due to fundings. You know, if you go to the council's website, you will actually find there are still many resources that parents can tap into. One of the things that I would strongly suggest is the resources that we do have, for example, some of the children's centres, but starting early. What we need to start introducing to our children is socializing with other young people, you know, being able to introduce them to, you know, to raise stimulation, and then start, you know, the nursery school at an appropriate age. And I think in terms of resources, whatever resources that we have in individual boroughs, what I find is some of our families are not necessarily accessing them. So we need to make sure that the resources that we do have, the little that we do have, families are accessing them. Your own GP is a very good resource. They need to be talking to their GP. Okay, tell your GP. Now, we as social workers, of course, you know, health visitors and other professionals, if there's a family who's in need, where they pick up, I say we, you know, wearing the hat of a social worker, and we, you know, social workers will come out and make assessments whether your family needs additional support. But I think the Bangladeshi community is still very behind in terms of using resources that are available, and we have to make sure that we open the doors for them.
Thanks, Mumtaz. Nasim Bhai, we are coming almost to end of our show, and I think the Mumtaz touched about getting Bangladeshi communities or other communities to use their resources. And how do we do that? How do we persuade them that it is for their good and not bad? How do we get them to work with the police and other authorities for the betterment of wider society, not just the Bangladeshi community?
I think, you know, we're going to find big challenges after COVID-19. We're going to get financial crisis, and, you know, whether the government looks at austerity or borrowing, I hope they look at borrowing money rather than going to austerity, because we need to spend money on this. It's about community education. It's about educating young people. It's about bringing them together, and it's got to be a long-term approach, because the short-term approach doesn't work. It's about putting more money into youth centres, community centres, putting more money into the police force, which they've started to do. So I think they've got to have a long-term strategy. And, you know, what's highlighted by the COVID-19 BAME disproportionality is the inequalities that exist in society. Once the government looks at that report and fulfills the recommendations, and I think we will go a long way towards addressing some of these. And also looking at Black Lives Matter, once they start looking at that, then I think we'll go a long way towards addressing some of these.
You just touched on that. That was my next question, because obviously during COVID-19, we saw how the community from all sorts of background and religion and people with faith and no faith, everybody kind of came together to support people in needs, whether it's be financially, with food, with clothing, with all sorts of stuff. And everyone, church, mosque, synagogue, you know, temples, gurdwaras, everybody was working together. And you know, I would love to see there's something really positive come out of that towards, you know, knife crime, drug dealings, and all the other things that is going on within our community. Because, you know, I feel that if we don't utilize that, then we will lose a significant of the strength that we have built through this disease. You know, in many ways, it brought communities together.
Yeah, And Ollie, that's a good point, because we got thousands of volunteers that we recruited throughout this COVID-19 crisis. And today we had a Labour group and we were talking about that in terms of renewal. What happens after this, looking at the short-term, medium-term, long-term policies to work with developing what's after the impact of COVID-19. So in Camden, we're already looking at that. And I think, it's about working with the community, work with the volunteers, work with the local police force, working with the institutions, creating jobs, working with the GPs. It's got to be a holistic approach, everyone working together, and then that way we can resolve the issue of knife crimes as well as the other issues, of inequality, which is the biggest one that leads to everything.
Mumtaz, I don't know if you had my questions, what I asked Nasim, in terms of during COVID-19, we all came together and how we can utilize that strength, taking forward in maybe, solving gang crimes, knife crimes, and all the other things that goes on within our communities. Okay, I think we have. Are you there, Mumtaz? Can you hear us? Okay. I think we're having a bit of a problem, Nasim, so it's just going to be you and me, one-to-one. As I said, we are almost end of our show, but I want to get final message from you for our viewers, and there is many Bangladeshis watching from abroad and non-Bangladeshi watching. There's many comments on our Facebook page, and I wanted to get a final message from you for the viewers and in communities in general, as a councillor, as a father, as a community person. What would you say to them?
Thanks, Ali. I think the main message from us, I think all of us, is please talk to your children, find out what they're up to, and build a good relationship with them. And also get engaged with your local authority, find out what they're doing, go to the different support programs, support your local community and work with your local community. And also, that's the best way we can improve it, and make sure your kids study, and that you get involved as a volunteer and working with your local community centre, youth centre. And, if the council isn't providing good services, then ask them for more services, because at the end of the day, I think tackling inequality is a big issue that's come up from COVID-19, and all local authorities will be looking at that. And if we don't knock on the doors, then we can't help young people. There needs to be youth services to support young people, parenting programs to support parents, and that way we can all support young people to stay away from knife crime, and try and talk to young people, keep them away from gangs and criminal activities.
Mumtaz, are you there?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah. So I wanted to get obviously final message.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I think what we did see during COVID lockdown, the strength of our community, the amount of people who came out to help neighbors, to help those who most needed, food and doing their shopping and basically, ensuring that people who were locked in their own homes were being supported. And I think the huge amount of support and solidarity from the community has gone to another level, thanks to COVID. But we have to now deal with the impact of COVID. And I hope, as Nasim Bhai said, that the government looks for alternative ways to fund resources rather than cut more services, because I think the impact of COVID will leave many families on the breadline. And I think what we've already seen is the rise in youth unemployment, and that's not going to help some of the young people that we've talked about. And my last thing that I want to really say is that we have to talk to young people. We have to engage our young people. Our children are our future, and unless we grow closer to them, we won't know what they're thinking and who they're mixing with. So let's try and build a better relationship with our children and young people.
Thank you so much to Councillor Nasim Ali OBE, Councillor Mumtaz Khan, and Nurun Ahmed, who had to unfortunately leave us early, for coming onto the show and for your contribution this evening.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our viewers who have joined, not just from the UK, but from around the world. I hope the show was useful. The message is very clear from my guest that we must talk to our children more. We must find out what our children is getting up to. And one thing I often say, the young people of today are the leaders of tomorrow, and we must shape them, we must support them, we must make them part of the process and decision making on especially the issues that affects them. We have spoken about Tower Hamlets a lot, and I have tried my best to get a councillor from Tower Hamlets. Unfortunately, the two councillors I contacted, one responded saying he wasn't available, and another councillor didn't bother to respond to my message or email or telephone call. So we always on London Bangla try to bring representative and people from all round to make sure that our viewers can get clear and concise views from our elected representative. But if they do not respond, there is not much we can do. Until next time, stay safe and look after each other. Thank you for joining this evening.